Welcome back, everyone. Today it is time to clown on the Zuck as Meta faces the year of efficiency with 10,000 more layoffs, yes, even more, and a shift in focus away from the metaverse and to AI. So, as Meta's VR products are taking price cuts, we've got competitors like Sony's PlayStation VR 2 being extremely well received by reviewers. What does this basically mean for the future of gaming and for virtual reality? And what happens when a lot of these trends, like with the AI, actually hit the games that we will play? Because I know two things from a friend or two in the Valley, and that is the VCs who are operating in the gaming space love anything that has AI in it. And two, a lot of people in that sector are very aware that it is absolutely unsustainable, that things will indeed crash and burn. Cutting through the BS is, of course, what we are all about. And recently, I was trying to find out what the hell was going on with the Silicon Valley Bank situation. I mean, people in YouTube were talking about contagion and the US banking system falling over and all this crazy stuff. A backlash on perhaps the UK tech sector. There was a lot. And then all of the political noise. So knowing what was actually happening was pretty damn hard. And that's why I went to ground.news/Bellular is the place to go. They're today's sponsor, and they give you a quick visual breakdown of all the outlets that are trying to cover a story. The political biases, even with the story, like who on what side is covering a story, how factual the sources are, who owns the sources. You can then easily compare headlines from different outlets for the same story to catch the spin. You can follow specific topics you're interested in, and with their browser extension, that superpower is brought everywhere. I mean, hell, while I was researching Microsoft for some more of our coverage on the Activision Blizzard merger, I actually stumbled upon how they've recently culled their AI ethics team. Neat. So Ground helps us stay informed, fight the bias of headlines that spread virally over social media, and just be more grounded in reality. Which sounds pretty damn good to me. And if it sounds good to you, then go to ground.news/Bellular. You can sign up for free there or subscribe for unlimited access with 30% off their top subscription before March 20th. Thanks to Ground for sponsoring. Let's go. Okay, things then. 10,000 more roles have been laid off at Meta per the Washington Post. And 5,000 roles that had been open for applications have also been cut. And this is on top of 11,000 job cuts that happened in January. So we actually do have 21,000 people getting the axe, which is really quite shocking. There is basically a broader plan for restructuring, right? So here's from the Washington Post. In addition to the cuts, Zuckerberg said the leaders of various divisions will be announcing restructuring plans intended to deflate the company's hierarchy, cancel lower priority projects, and reduce the pace of hiring. Inside the company, some expected reassigned workers to quit, causing attrition by default. And of course, remember, if your boss ever says you're fired and you say, "Ha, no, you can't fire me, I quit anyway," then I'm pretty sure you don't get severance and stuff. So one of the things that they will do is that they will like to set things up in a position where people think, you know what, I want to go and get a job somewhere else. And that often ends up working because the person then probably gets a better or similar offer at another company. Then the likes of Meta don't have to pay them a big, chunky amount of money. Now, this is what Zuckerberg is calling the year of efficiency in a move that, I don't know, perhaps he stole from the Hearthstone team, given what's been going on with that game's professional scene. The one big area that's been impacted is Reality Labs. Oh boy. So, Reality Labs would have to scrutinize its product roadmap to determine what changes need to be made in line with the company's budget considerations. The reality is that we need to operate differently as a company, and that means making some tough choices without the amount of resources that we may have been used to. Of course, you got to remember that John Carmack. Now, John Carmack, legend of the industry. I mean, you had Carmack and Romero. They made Doom, right? It's that John Carmack. He, of course, left. Massive enthusiast. John was a massive enthusiast for virtual reality, so he's away. Now, he was only contributing 20% of his work week as a consulting CTO. And what was really interesting about that was basically Carmack was saying a lot of stuff that the Zuck actually ended up kind of speaking to, right? And, I mean, I know that, like, by virtue of the numbers, some folks watching are probably at very large corporations, and I imagine some of this does ring true. There is no way to sugarcoat this. I think our organization is operating at half the effectiveness that would make me happy. And he goes on to say, a good fraction of the things I complain about eventually turn my way a year or two, or after a year or two passes, and the evidence piles up. But I've never been able to kill stupid things before they cause damage, or set a direction and have a team actually stick to it. So obviously a case of Facebook actually being Meta actually being a pretty shitty company. And it actually gets to something. It was a post made by Jason Fried, who is one of the co-founders of 37 Signals, that do Basecamp, a few other things. Essentially just talking about, like, design teams are bloated. Just generally speaking, across the industry, shit's bloated and really inefficient. That is something that I think you quite obviously see. It's happening here. You always hear tales of, like, people who end up in one of these big tech companies, and they basically actually might spend, like, 2 years there. And they don't really get to ship that much because it's just an endless cycle of, review and feedback and blah, 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 and nothing actually gets done. I think it's one of those things, we had this, like, zero interest rate environment for a very, very, very long time. So basically capital was cheap. I think, all these growth stocks were absolutely going to the moon, which certainly means there's a lot of stock YouTubers that, funny enough, were successful during a massive bull market who are now looking perhaps just a little bit silly. I guess you just see, things deflating again everywhere. So they're moving away from metaverse. What are they moving to? You have one guess, and that is artificial intelligence. So let's talk about that. Right. This is what the Zuck said. Our single largest investment is in advancing AI and building it into every one of our products. Now, they did talk about the meta stuff still being, like, kind of central to, they say, defining the future of social connection. But basically, the way they talked about it is that they've already done the leading work on it, which kind of more implies that they've, like, charted a path for others to follow. Now, given the user metrics, I would say no. Zuck, you managed to, like, burn, just shy of, like, $13 billion last year, and you didn't even accomplish, like, you didn't even accomplish VR chat. I mean, I'm sure they had parity with VR chat in many ways, but look at what people actually used. It was VR chat. Can you imagine that they spent all that money and they're still getting totally creamed by VR chat? Yeah, there you go. So anyway, he said that they've made a new top-level product group focused on generative AI to turbocharge their work in that area. They'll explore experiences with text, images, and then video and multimodal experiences. Basically they're just chasing all of the stuff. They've got their own research-focused language model that is called Llama. Now, the thing is, they've actually done 2 chatbots before. They've been called BlenderBot and Galactica. And hey, if you make something called Galactica and it fails, I mean, I will be out for blood. You cannot do that to Galactica. But anyway, BlenderBot was released in August 2022, and it was shit. Then Galactica came out in November of 2022, and it lasted for 3 days before it basically also completely went off the rails. Their chief AI scientist said, Galactica demo offline for now. It's no longer possible to have some fun by casually misusing it. Happy? Which is to say, like, all right, but I think something that is a broad theme for big tech. You don't just get to make the technology, throw it out into the world, and sort of go, it's fine. No, you've got to actually think about how it's going to work with real people who want to say some dumb shit in it for a laugh because it's funny. Again, a bunch of, very accomplished people, but maybe not the most emotionally intelligent or socially intelligent people are, acquiring humongous amounts of resources, creating products that impact pretty much everybody on Earth, hyper-optimizing their algorithms, and perhaps not always thinking about the social cost of what they're actually doing, right? Which is quite challenging then. Because you essentially, it's a bit like with what some people say about a carbon tax, where it's like the carbon emission is an unpriced negative externality where, The people doing the polluting get to do the polluting for free, but then society has to foot the bill for cleaning it up. And I suppose it is a little bit like that with all of these big tech companies, right? They end up causing so many societal harms that they never really have to pay any form of price for. Now, I'm not advocating for some sort of new algo tax or anything. I'm just saying that's worth thinking about when we're talking about any of these issues. But anyway, they still do have a foot in the metaverse, but they're going fully into AI. And when we then take a look at the tech that's being left behind, kind of interesting thing. So the Oculus, or the Quest Pro, sorry, the Meta Quest Pro is going down from $1,500 to $1,000. And then the 256 gig version of the Quest 2 is dropping from $499 to $429, which means it's just $30 more than it cost when it came out. But the 128 gig model is not going to be coming down in price. I will say this, right? Look, man, it's awesome. Just plain straight up, I think that the Meta Quest 2 is an incredible piece of kit. You can, of course, you should buy a replacement back strap and maybe like, I think Logitech have some clip-on speakers that are pretty cool. But you can do that, have some great VR experiences, hop onto Beat Saber, get SideQuest going so that you can just download all the custom tracks, and then you can get extremely sweaty to a bunch of anime music and Beat Saber, and you will actually burn some calories. It's a pretty damn fun experience. Now, that being said, in late 2023, there apparently is a Quest 2 successor, but this is stuff from The Verge's sources at Meta, and this actually happened before all these layoffs, so we're not exactly sure, but apparently it's twice as thin, at least twice as powerful, and it costs slightly more, and will prominently feature mixed reality experiences that don't fully immerse the wearer because of like a bunch of front-facing cameras. So who the hell knows, but obviously that was prior to everything. And we should say, Meta sold nearly 20 million Quests to date, which honestly is pretty sick. Maybe not enough to justify their whole Reality Labs division spend, but pretty sick. Definitely can say that. As for the competition, though, that's where we're going to be heading back into games. The competition, right? TLDR, Sony's PSVR 2 is basically incredible. It is extremely comfortable. Now, you do have a fairly large downside, which is software. Software is expensive for that. And yeah, you could get Beat Saber on it, but you can't put all the custom songs on it. So what's the point of Beat Saber, right? So it's one of those challenging things, but evidently, like Sony, fair play to them. They are an innovator in this space. They're bringing it to the console market, and you are going to get a pretty damn good experience. Like, the thing is, if you're using the Meta Quest 2 with the link cable, you are actually kind of limited in some of what you're going to get there. So PSVR 2, great bit of kit, but overall, I think we have seen a situation where VR, it has just not kicked off in the way that many people thought it would have with gaming. And I think ultimately that's just because it's not ended up being, I think, the overall end-to-end experience that a lot of people want. Like, it still is too bulky, and it is a right pain in the ass to have to, rearrange your bedroom, rearrange your living room. I think that ultimately is the issue. Like, the fantasy of just having a holodeck is almost there with the inside-out tracking of these modern platforms. But the thing then is, like, all right, do you have the space for that? Do you have this mythical thing known as, I don't know, a garden that has a freaking holodeck shed? Probably not. So it's challenging. Now, on PSVR 2, like, I know Matt's not here for this recording, but he did play the latest Gran Turismo on a PSVR 2 at a friend's house. And he basically said it was a mind-blowing good experience. I mean, with the OLED display in the PSVR 2 and everything, absolutely stunning. So it could be that situation where when people don't have, the screen door effect, they don't have some of the things that happen because those Fresnel lenses, I believe they're called. When the resolution is high enough, the performance is good enough, when text is actually reliably readable, all of these things, I think then you'll start to see VR actually be at the stage where it's good enough for your average punter to be really interested. Because right now, it is almost there, and you just have to look at the sales figures for the Quest 2. But I think we just need some larger experiences, and ultimately, to go and do a session of VR for a lot of people is just a more demanding experience than flicking a game on and going, right? It almost does lend itself more to sort of short session time experiences. The final thing I want to talk on, though, is artificial intelligence. So by now you probably know that GPT, for its Plus users, now actually has access to the GPT-4 model from OpenAI. So I've been using it. It is fairly interesting. It's actually fairly good at some things. I mean, a lot of people are finding it to be honestly quite mind-blowing. I'd say that I basically am as well. For me, it's one of those things where it's an accelerator, it's a co-pilot. There's times where it's like, say, a complicated, Excel formula. Bam, it'll do that. Often like, being quite dyslexic, it is significantly strong at fixing, spelling errors, grammar errors, helping me rewrite, maybe rewrite a sentence, focus things to be writing an active voice rather than passive voice. But what we are going to be seeing is quite a lot more of this heading into the games space, right? I know that when we talk about, say, the venture capital scene and what a lot of founders are really talking to each other about, it is AI. It is, right? Just, you can take my word on that, it is. And this is where things are going to be really rather interesting, because obviously you see a very large pushback against generative AI because a lot of those models, like in Midjourney, they are just being trained off stuff that is scraped in the internet. And a lot of people would say, well, a normal artist will build a mood board, look at references, and then from that make their own work. The AI is just doing that. But then I would say back to that, okay, but we have this concept called the dose makes the poison. In this case, the compute makes the poison. It takes a person a lot of time and effort to do that. It takes the generative AI not that much time to do it once the model's been built. The dose makes the poison, right? Ultimately, then, we are in a situation where quite a lot of founders are looking to see how much not only cost they can save, but how much time that they can save by moving super quick on this type of thing. Now, I know that DALL-E 2, I think it's DALL-E 2, it's the one where you can actually give it like photos of you, and then it can start generating you. So if I wanted to have, me doing one of those pog faces, I could probably just give it a photo or two of me and then it'll make a pog version of me or something. So that is possible, right? Ultimately then, where we're going to see this in games, there's the good way and there's the bad way. And then there's also the fun experiment way. Do you remember AI Dungeon? That was just a cool little experiment, like an old text-based dungeon that, honestly, that was unfortunately a little bit before my time, but I'm sure some of you enjoyed those, or, maybe parents or whatever, but man, like AI Dungeon was just quite a bit of fun. But what we are going to see is, I think broadly then, two things. Thing number one is these being used in the annoying grifter way, right? Which is just kind of replacing the human soul for a cheap copy, right? A Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox. And I think you consistently see a lot of the, I'll just say the word like AI bros, talking about like, oh, look at this incredible image that I prompted. And a lot of people that have a more artistic eye will say, oh, that composition, that character design. It's like, yeah, you've made a thing, but what does it say? What's really going on here? You'll see quite a lot of that. Now, the other side of it is where it could be turbo powerful. So what can happen whenever we can get an ethically trained generative AI model that then is sold? Realistically, we would all like it to be a one-time purchase. You give $1,000 to a company, you get this software, you get support, you use it. No, it's probably going to be yet another SaaS subscription. But what that's probably going to mean is like, okay, what if you need to generate some textures? Well, maybe your principal artist can do some work with when I say ethically trained AI, I would mean ones where perhaps artists are selling their assets to it. Maybe it's operating in a similar business model to that of stock image or stock video websites. I'm not exactly sure, but it is that thing where, look, the technology's coming. We cannot stop the technology from coming. We need to accept that it's coming and then be laser focused on how to ensure that the best possible outcome happens from that, right? Because, if we just complain about it. It's like, yeah, there's a lot to complain about. But if all we do is that and we're not focused on solutions, then the bad thing is going to happen. So there is a world where, imagine, say, Photoshop, right? It's got its content-aware fill tool. That's used a hell of a lot. But imagine a content-aware fill tool that was truly mega smart. I mean, DALL-E 2 can actually do that with extending an image. There could be times where that could be quite useful in many different production workflows. Times where artists could maybe put some of their work in and then be able to noodle on ideas really, really quick. So that's like the good version of this sort of AI. I think similar then for the language models, I would be very interested in what sort of like dynamic world you could create, with like NPCs or like, running as like a little node of a language model. That would be quite fascinating, right? I mean, imagine something like that masterfully implemented in a Skyrim or Oblivion-like game. I mean, the meme with those games has always been like, you play the Oblivion music and you then have some very awkward, stilted dialogue. You could basically solve that problem in a way that won't cause loads of issues. Here's another way where actually it could... This is a very interesting thing. Very beneficial, but also kind of worrisome in a way that it disrupts an industry. Translation is really expensive. Take the pale beyond. Our script's over 300,000 words. You have, that is so expensive to localize. Now, would I love for it to be in Polish and German and Spanish and French and, as many languages as would be possible? Yes, I would love that. But there's no way we would hit return on, investment, right? What happens when you can give a model your script, say, this is my voice, this is my intent, and then have it translate your work in a way that still retains your story? Because you've got to remember, localization, it's not just putting something into Google Translate. Localization is, in many cases, when it's well done, a creative field. Look at Koji Fox and FF14, right? But then the thing is, while it could really mean that more games could come out in more languages that more customers could enjoy, it also does mean that the artistic side of the localization is now being done by a computer. Now, I think there could be a case where this could be used to turbocharge somebody who is a translator and can use this tool as a co-pilot to work more efficiently, right? Thus benefiting the economy by increasing productivity, allowing fewer people to do more work, which fundamentally is what makes standards of living and GDPs and all that shit rise. But again, you wonder, how many people does this displace? What does this overall mean for the future of gaming? What I know is that these are extremely powerful tools. The big companies will all be going for this, and that's what's going to happen. Right? That is what's going to happen. The people who do not use it will just be outcompeted. And it's one of those things, I know for many people that might be a pretty damn bitter pill to swallow, but I don't want to just fool around and pretend that that's not going to happen, because it's a very real possibility. I mean, the second the likes of, BuzzFeed and stuff even announce that they're considering that they want to do articles via an AI, you see the stock price, go up. It's happened in a few instances. Now, of course, I think it was CNET who were doing that, and a lot of junk came out of it. But look, compare where Midjourney version 1 was to version 5. That's 1 year of progress. I don't know, whenever people talk about Rocco's Basilisk, whenever people talk about oh no, we've made the demon box, you just have to wonder what 5 or 10 years is going to be like, because the rate of acceleration, this is an exponential curve, and maybe, if the curve is like this, maybe we're only here, and it has that much further to go, because ultimately it's just going to come down to how many GPUs can they throw at these problems to just get, bigger and bigger and bigger models. Fascinating stuff. It's going to impact us all. It's going to impact most industries, actually. And gaming is certainly going to be one of them, considering the games use a lot of code, a lot of art, and a lot of text. All things that AIs are being targeted at. We see the likes of Meta jumping on that. I know for a fact that even within the gaming VC space, this is all being talked about quite a lot. And for the final thing that I actually did say I would say at the start of the video, and I shall now do, is just as a bit of a TLDR, a lot of people think that the scene is extremely unsustainable. which I suppose would make sense. Maybe it's that we went from this, insane free money, cost of capital's tiny, situation into now a far more, rough economic situation. But suffice to say, like, I have heard of what some startup salaries are in the likes of SoCal. Eye-watering. Like, that thing where it's like, wow, for one person's salary, I could make a 10-hour-long video game. That's insane. What's going on over there? So I suppose imagine a little bit of a crash. I think there is going to be a big culling off of companies. And people are going to be very glad that they're in a Dreamhaven group, considering that has the Moorheim's very substantial financial backing. And, maybe that's a safer form of capital than quite a few others that are floating around the valley. Who knows? But that's it for today's check-in with, big tech, all the things that are going on. Of course, a massive thank you to Ground News, today's sponsor. They have an awesome mission. Their tools are great. It's really nice just to be able to click in a story and see, oh, here's who's covering it, who's not covering it. Let's compare the headlines. Let's see what the more factual sources are saying. I mean, what a cool service to have. It is one of those things where there's clearly a societal need, so I was very happy to bring them on as a partner for the channel. Okay, have a brilliant day, everybody, and I'll see you next time.